Good afternoon, everybody. We're calling the regular monthly meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to order for Wednesday, January 27th, 2016. And if you'd all rise for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Ms. Blackman, would you call roll, please?
Chair Wiscombe.
Here.
Vice Chair Rincon Ibarra.
Here.
Commissioner Longstreet.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Friend. Here. Commissioner Heaton is absent. Commissioner Cavazos.
Here.
Great, thank you very much. Any changes to the agenda, Ms. Zachary? Okay. No one's here to speak in public comment, so on items not on the agenda, so we're closing public comment. We have no youth council report, so let's move to commissioner committee assignment reports, and as usual, we'll just go down the row. If you have nothing, that's fine. Ms. French?
I was unable to attend the arts and crafts show.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Longstreet?
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting where we discussed applications for the Neighborhood Improvement Project, and next month we will be voting on those projects, and we also have a couple of projects before the CDBG board, and I will be attending that meeting to advocate for those projects, which are the tennis court park improvement and our second, youth services. So also attended the LCP, the Local Coastal Plan Update Draft meeting, and we will be working on that. I serve on that with Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cavazos?
Yeah, I attended the... Got to figure this all out again. I attended the first youth council meeting. They're working on a retreat. They also were sponsoring or hosting a Martin Luther King Day essay contest. I missed the meeting yesterday, so I don't know how it panned out, but I thought it was very interesting, and hopefully it worked out for them.
Great. Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe, Mr. Cavazos, will we be getting a new youth representative? Could you bring that up to them?
It comes up every meeting. They're working on it.
Thank you. Mr. Rincon?
No report.
Okay. Ms. Clark?
I attended the fund development meeting of the Park Foundation, which I believe Bill will report on, and I was unable to attend the local coastal program meeting or the park board meeting this month.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I attended the regular Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting. Mr. Downey gave us a nice report on violations, and it's great news. In 2013, we had around 60 violations. In 2014, around 25. And in 2015, around 21. So it's pretty impressive how the numbers have decreased. And congratulations to the Urban Forest Division for getting the word out, and I think it's really helped. Duke McPherson was elected as the chair of the Street Tree Advisory Committee, and Maury Treeman as the vice chair for the upcoming year. With Ms. Longstreet, I attended the local coastal program update meeting, and we received a new working draft that's dated January 20th, 2016. And we're going to another meeting in early February where we'll review and comment on sections of that draft. There is anticipated to be a public workshop this spring on the local coastal program, and that's going to be in April, according to staff. And also, boards and commissions will discuss the program during the month of April. So it will be brought to the commission sometime during that month. I also attended the park meeting on January 20th. We discussed our Magic on the Urban Wine Trail event, and pleased that we have Mission Linen Supply again as our presenting sponsor. So if you'd all save the date, it's Sunday, April 17th from 3 to 6 p.m. And we're beginning to look for silent auction items for the event. So if you know any merchants who might be willing to donate, we would really appreciate it. And you can contact me or contact Judith McCaffrey or Nicole Clark. Nicole and I co-chair the Fund Development Committee, so any of us can help you on that. And at that meeting, Ms. Zachary gave a briefing on the stretching equipment for the bird refuge, and the park board authorized withdrawal of funds for this purpose. So that's exciting that that's moving forward. No. So that's all I have to report. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have in our packet a summary of council actions. Does anyone have any questions on those? Okay.
No, but I would think the commission would send our congratulations to Janet Sackett for her 30 years of service.
Yes, I think that's a great yes. Okay, and then we have minutes from the regular meeting on Wednesday, December 16th, 2015. And does anyone have any changes, or I'd entertain a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes as they stand.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so motion by Ms. French, second by Ms. Longstreet. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and we're moving on now to the Street Tree Advisory Committee items. The first item is Agenda 3A1, which is 1324 Portezuelo Avenue. Mr. Downey, welcome.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, at 1324 Portezuelo Avenue, the applicant is requesting to remove the street tree. It is a weeping bottlebrush tree directly adjacent to the driveway apron. They are hoping to make improvements to the yard and actually have begun some of those improvements in the landscaping. This tree being right next to the driveway and directly in front of one of the landscape trees that they planted in their yard, and the fact that it has a limb that is fairly low over the roadway, it is not necessarily consistent with the placement under our current regulations for the street tree master plan. They are requesting to remove the tree and replace with another street tree. They will be coming back to Commission later on with a request to change the designation because they'd like to plant a different species. The committee reviewed the application of the materials and determined that those facts were true, that it was pretty close to the driveway, and replacing it with a new tree farther away from the driveway would be a benefit to the community. Their recommendation is to approve the removal on the condition that a replacement designated tree be planted in its place.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Downey. We don't have any public comments, so we're on to the commission for questions and discussion. Yes, Ms. French.
I just have a quick question. Will the new tree be planted in any particular period of time after the removal of this one? Is it usually contingent on a time period? Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner French, the city's Parks and Recreation Department tree permit is only valid for 60 days. If the commission concurs with the Street Tree Advisory Committee and conditionally approves it, once they obtain their permit, they have to plant the tree within the time frame of the permit.
Anyone else? Okay, would someone, yes, Ms. Clark?
Will the applicant have time to come back and get the street tree designation changed before the 60-day permit is expired?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, the permit isn't issued until they're ready to move forward with the project. So we would advise them that they either need to plant the currently designated tree if they want a permit now, or wait until such time a new designation is established to request the permit.
Anyone else? Ms. Longstreet?
I'd make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation and make the findings we're using is this is in good urban management,
Good forest management.
good forest management, for the removal of the tree at 1324 Portezuelo.
Replace?
With, yes, concur with the recommendation for the replacement also.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, Ms. Clark seconds it. Is there any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we're moving on to agenda item 3B1, which is 3064 Lucinda Lane. Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, at 3064 Lucinda Lane is a fairly mature chamois ash tree in the front setback. The owner is requesting to remove the tree because he's stating that he is interfering with underground utilities and that it creates mess and debris and the seeds repopulate in the neighborhood. The committee went to the site and reviewed the application materials and determined that there's a jacaranda on the property not too far away, and the proposed replacement of another jacaranda would be consistent with the size of the lot. They commented that their recommendation to approve is based on the size this tree, potential size this tree can get, and that the proposed replacement would be a more appropriately sized for the property rather than the underground utility problems. So their recommendation is to approve the removal on the condition that the applicant replace with the jacaranda as proposed.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Ms. Clark.
Is the jacaranda root system shallower than the current species and less likely to interfere with underground utilities?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, the committee also commented that they'd like to see the new tree planted a little farther away from the underground utilities. To answer your question, for most trees, 95% of the tree roots exist in the top 3 feet of soil. So any interference with utilities would exist for any tree if the conditions are right. So it really doesn't matter the jacaranda versus the ash tree in that relation.
I had one question, Mr. Downey. My notes showed that my pen just fell apart. My notes showed that the Street Tree Advisory Committee said a jacaranda minimum 24-inch box or a 24-inch box. Did you have that in as part of the recommendation?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, I did not have that size recommendation. We typically don't dictate a size of the installation tree unless the applicant proposes one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, I'd certainly entertain a motion. Anyone want to? Yes, Ms. French?
Thank you. I move that we concur with the advisory committee's recommendation for removal and on contingent on the replacement with a jacaranda.
Okay, do I hear a second for that?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Longstreet seconds that motion. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, and we're moving on to agenda item 3B2, which is 1267 and 1271 Veronica Springs Road. Mr. Downing?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, these properties are the front properties of a 4-unit planned development. In front of one of the properties is a fairly small Mexican fan palm that was a volunteer, likely a seed dropped from a bird or something. It's directly adjacent to between the sidewalk and a split rail fence, and about to overtake the sidewalk. So it wasn't a planned tree by any means. It simply grew there. The other tree is a sycamore that's underneath the high voltage lines and has been pruned to keep it out of the vicinity of the lines by the utility companies. This has caused the canopy of the tree to be completely different from the species. It's normally a very erect, upright tree, and because it's continually pruned, the canopy is developing at a lower level and spreading, completely obliterating the front yard with the canopy. The applicant is requesting to remove that tree and replace it with a Marina strawberry tree, which is consistent with another tree on the lot that they're maintaining. So the committee looked at the trees. They determined that the Mexican fan palm's just simply in the wrong place and shouldn't ever have been allowed to be there. And the unfortunate thing about the sycamore is that its growth habit is in conflict with the utilities, and that the proposed replacement would be much more consistent with and much more aesthetically pleasing with that area. Their recommendation is to approve both removals on the condition that one of the trees is replaced with a minimum 24-inch box, a Marina strawberry tree. I'll note that the applicant did indicate that they would plant a 24-inch box in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Okay, we have no public comment on this, so it's back to the commission for discussion or questions. Anyone? Yes, Mr. Cavazos.
So with the fan palm, there is no replacement tree required for that one?
Chair was Commissioner Cavazos there. They didn't propose one, and there are other trees in the area that the committee didn't think it was necessary to replace that tree.
Yes,
The
Ms.
comment, the one other thing I noticed at the site was that drainage ditch. It seemed like quite a serious drainage ditch there that could become blocked with the amount of leaves that a sycamore gives off. It seemed like you could end up with some issues there. So
Sure.
I think it's a good...
Chair with Commissioner Longstreet, that ditch is actually a bioswale. It's designed to have the waters from the property drain onto the property rather than off of the property. So it serves a purpose to allow more rainwater to penetrate into the groundwater.
I'd make a motion to concur with the removal and replacement as recommended by the Street Tree Advisory Committee for 1267 and 1271 Veronica Springs Road. I think that does it. And that we made the findings necessary. I learned my lesson. Somewhat.
I second the motion.
Okay, I think it's probably good forest management practices.
Good, yes.
Considering that the sycamore can't be trimmed back to health, so, yeah, but, okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Downey, appreciate it. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 4. Oh, that's right, you stay here, yeah. This is the residency requirement and appointment for Street Tree Advisory Committee for action. So we have 2 action items. One is changing the eligibility requirements of Street Tree Advisory Committee if the commission so chooses to do so, to allow up to 2 members, and then if we do so, B would be appoint Bruce Reed to fill the vacant Street Tree Advisory Committee position, and he was here to speak in December. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Downey.
Chair Wiscombe Commissioners, at the December meeting, the Commission asked that we come back to you with information about changing the residency for the Street Tree Advisory Committee. At that meeting, we had 3 applicants for 3 vacant positions. However, only the current committee makeup only allows for 1 position for people that reside outside the city limits. At that meeting, 2 of the applicants were from residents that live outside the city limits. So the committee appointed 2 of the 3 vacancies, and the other one remained vacant. Since December 1979, when the committee was established, the commission over time has made a number of changes to that committee when circumstances warranted those changes. The last of those was January 27th, coincidentally, 2010, where the commission voted to allow up to 1 member reside outside the city limits. At that meeting, as well as the 2 meetings since then, where residency was up for membership, we've had multiple applications and interest from qualified people who reside outside the city limits. We brought this to the Street Tree Advisory Committee for their comments and recommendation. Their comments were that there's many people who reside outside the city limits but work in the city, or have their businesses related to trees and frequently within the city. They have an interest and expertise that's valuable. They determined that if we can get highly qualified people to fill the role to advise the city and the commission on these matters, that it would be important to have full committees to do that. So their recommendation is also to allow up to 2 members reside outside the city limit. Now, if the commission concurs with that, it doesn't mean that 2 of the members have to reside outside the city limits. It simply means that up to 2 of the members can reside outside of the city limits. If we get less non-resident applications and we get resident applications, it certainly could be filled with those members as well. So with that information, the Street Tree Advisory Committee and staff recommends that you change the residency requirement to include up to 2 members reside outside the city limits, and make the appointment of Bruce Reed to the vacant Street Tree Advisory Committee position.
Bless you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Downey. We have no public comment on this, so it's back to the commission for questions and action. So discussion. Does anyone? Yes, Ms. French?
I have an open question that's not reflective of the candidates that have been discussed at all. It's just an open question. I think it's interesting that arborists are potentially interested in participating in the committee. It seems like it's a great opportunity to get prospective job opportunities if they recommend that a tree is cut down, right? And I wondered if there was a sense of conflict of interest, if there's any discussion that if you're on the committee, you can't work on the houses you've made recommendations. I just as a kind of a naive question, just since I haven't been on the commission that long, so I wondered what the policy and practice is. Thank you.
Chair Wiscombe and all of commissioners, Commissioner French as well, when we have applicants that serve as appointed city officials, they understand the potential for conflict of interest, particularly economic conflict of interest. And in the past, when there has been an interest on the part of a Street Tree Advisory Committee member, particularly related to either a tree that they may have been asked to consult on or a landscape, which includes tree removals, they recuse themselves from the vote.
And that's absolutely why it's important to have full membership on STAC, because if someone is absent, it makes it really difficult when you're trying to have a quorum and operate efficiently. Ms. Longstreet.
I was reflecting on the changes that have happened in the time I've been here, and I think I've been here for all of these changes. And it has been an evolution of establishing a committee size and makeup that works over the years. I remember when it was 3, it went to the 2 alternates because they couldn't get a quorum. The alternates kind of said, well, if we're going to go along, let's all vote. And it's just interesting that we've come to another passage. And I think the reality is that many professional and working people can no longer afford to live in our city and still have a very deep interest and care a lot about it. And we sometimes have to change with the times.
Okay, anyone else? Would we can take these items separately or together? Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'd make a motion. I'd make a motion together that we change the eligibility requirements for the Street Tree Advisory Committee to allow up to 2 members to reside outside the city limits, and that we appoint Bruce Reed, who we interviewed in December of 2015, to the STAC Committee.
Okay. I'll second that motion. So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Downey. Look forward to having Bruce Reed on board. He's, I think he's going to be a big asset to the committee. No. So now we're moving on to agenda item number 5, which is, for our information, Neighborhood Center Guidelines. Ms. McCaffrey, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners. My name is Judith McCaffrey. I'm a Recreation Manager with the Parks and Recreation Department, and I'm here this afternoon to give you an informational presentation about some revised facility use policies that we'll be implementing at our neighborhood centers. Neighborhood and Outreach Services is just one of a number of sections within the Parks and Recreation Department. The mission of this section is to provide services that strengthen families and improve outcomes for youth, and with the goal of strengthening families in our community. Neighborhood and Outreach Services operates 3 neighborhood centers, as you can see there, the Louise Lowry Davis Center, the Franklin Center, and the West Side Center. These centers provide a great variety of programs and services to youth, teens, families, seniors. They also provide affordable facilities for families and nonprofits to rent for meetings and special family events like birthdays, quinceañeras, or wedding ceremonies. And they also provide affordable lease space to small local nonprofits that serve our community. Fees received from rentals from these facilities help the department to cover our facility costs and generate revenue to help fund some free programs that we offer at the centers. I want to start this evening by giving you a little background on the issue. In spring of 2014, almost 2 years ago, the department suspended some rentals at the centers after some complaints of noise, inappropriate behaviors, and impacts to the neighborhood, specifically noise and trash that was generated from those rentals. Specifically, the rentals that were suspended included rentals where people wanted to serve alcohol as part of their event or have amplified music or live bands. So as a staff, we took a step back and took the time to review and revise our policies. And what we did was we built on the successful model we have currently going on in our beachfront facilities, Cabrillo Pavilion, Chase Palm Park Center, Carrillo Recreation Center. And we also took into account some of those specific concerns that were expressed by our neighbors of the neighborhood centers when developing these policies. We've also taken the time to recruit and train a very qualified group of monitor staff, facility monitors who would be monitoring the events. Department staff are now ready to implement these new rules and policies for what we feel is a threefold benefit. including being able to fulfill the community need for affordable rental facilities. That's really what these neighborhood centers provide to families, to help us to better mitigate and manage some of these concerns of our neighbors in relation to noise. And the rules also give our staff better tools to enforce the rules. So this month we had 3 neighborhood meetings, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in the next slide. And then that brings us, me here tonight to tell you what we've been working on. So let me tell you a little bit about the neighborhood meetings. So in mid-December, for residents who live within close proximity to our 3 neighborhood centers, we mailed them invitations to attend an informational meeting. We actually we had 3 scheduled for this month. Staff were there on hand to give a presentation regarding the new policies and to provide neighbors the opportunity to meet staff, ask questions, give their feedback, and share any concerns that they might have. The West Side Center's meeting had 6 people in attendance. The Louise Lowry Davis Center only had 1. And we did not actually have anyone attend the Franklin meeting. Prior to the Franklin meeting, I will say we did receive 2 telephone calls and an email from neighbors. They all 3 expressed positive feelings about the neighborhood center and their role in their neighborhood. We felt good about that. And we also believe that the attendance was really indicative, an indicator of the overall neighborhood compatibility, their feeling of compatibility with the facility operations. We did get some valuable feedback, though, so I'd like to talk a little bit about that. We did have a really good turnout of 6 neighbors there, as I said, at the West Side Center. We were able to hear some of their concerns. Of course, many of them we'd heard before, but we were able to take those concerns and create our policies. And so I'll talk specifically about how those policies are addressing those concerns. We also had representatives from a number of churches that are around the facility. And it was really nice to hear their comments about how they appreciated how, especially the West Side Center, had just really improved its appearance, what was going on there, the new playground, that's happened in the last few years, the beautiful mural there, and a lot of the great activities going on at the center. So they were really pleased with a lot of the positive changes they'd already seen there. I mentioned the telephone calls. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the neighborhood concerns and how our new rules address those concerns. So how can noise and its impacts be reduced was one of their questions. One of the changes we made is that we are having our rentals end earlier at our neighborhood centers because they are located in neighborhoods. So rentals will now be ending at 9:30. And just to give you an idea of how that compares to some of our other facilities, events must end there at other city facilities at 11 p.m. on weekdays and 12 midnight on Friday and Saturdays. So that's considerably earlier, with the idea that after the party ends at 9:30, that they would have a cleanup afterwards and be out of the facility no later, and the parking lot, no later than 10:30. We also have decided to prohibit live amplified bands. We will allow acoustic groups and DJ music. And we will be measuring the sound levels. We've purchased some decibel meters. We use those very successfully at Oak Park for music events and at other facilities. So we've purchased those, and we'll be using those to make sure that the sound levels remain consistent with what is acceptable in the neighborhood. And then, as we do in our other facilities, we'll be requiring security guards at these private parties. How can trash be reduced? We have looked at our security deposits, and we have increased them to $500. And typically, when a person rents our facility, the security deposit is refunded because the place is left in good, clean condition, and they followed the rules, and there's no damage. So typically, I'd say 99% of the time, the security deposit is returned. But it is retained, as I said. If the facility is damaged, if extra cleaning is required, or if the renter violates the rules. We'll also be very closely supervising cleanup. We have facility monitors who are there from the beginning to the end of every event, from setup to cleanup, to make sure that the facility and the surrounding area is cleaned. We've also added some additional trash and recycling containers. And specifically at the west side, since we actually, in the last 2 years, we've actually have very improved security lighting all around the facilities. So it's really easy to see trash after the event and make sure it's cleaned up so the neighborhood's nice and clean afterwards. There was also some concern expressed in the past that neighbors couldn't determine who the facility monitor was at an event if they went across the street, for example, to talk to someone, or they didn't have a telephone number that they could call that was being answered. So we looked at how we could address that by providing the monitor with a cell phone that they would have on their person the entire event, so a neighbor could call if they had a concern. And also, all our monitors at the neighborhood centers will now be very easily identifiable with a city shirt and name tag. So if a neighbor came over and had some concerns, they could locate that person very quickly. There was also a concern that was noted about limited parking in the neighborhoods. And yes, the facilities all have parking lots, but yes, there is parking in the neighborhood as well. And how we could talk to the renters about that limited parking and encourage them to carpool. So we've included that additional information in our new rental information, and that's something that staff people will be talking with the renter about prior to them renting the facility. So encouraging them to encourage their guests to carpool to the event, knowing that there is limited parking in the area. Okay, now a little bit about how we're going to implement the project. Well, we currently actually have a vacant position in Neighborhood and Outreach Services, and we revised the duties of that person. And they will be, part of their duties will be to oversee the rentals at the 3 neighborhood centers. Now, renters will still be working with the staff at each one of those centers to plan their party and things, but we will have one person who's overseeing that whole process to make sure that everything rolls out in a very organized manner. That person will also be scheduling and supervising our new facility monitors. And as I said, we do have a new group of facility monitors. The last 2 months, they've been working in our other facilities, getting training and on how to monitor a party, how to enforce the rules. So they'll be ready to implement this process. You might ask how renters are held accountable to the rules when they rent a facility. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So in all our facility rentals, the renter signs a contract, and they actually have their vendors sign the contract as well. That might be their caterer, or their florist, or their DJ, whoever they might have that's providing services at their event. This contract lists all the rules and regulations and what happens if they're violated. We also mentioned that the security deposits have been increased, so there is a potential loss of security deposit if the renter does not follow the rules or if extra cleaning is required for their event. And as a last resort, and I will say, having worked for the city for 17 years and at this point and overseeing a lot of facility rentals over those years, I really can't think of maybe 1 or 2 times at the most that this has ever happened, but an event could be shut down early with no refund of fees if the renter refuses to comply. And as I mentioned, a facility monitor is on site at all times to enforce the rules. So they serve as really the eyes and ears of our department. They're easily identifiable, and if they see something that's violating the rules during the event, they're there to point it out and make sure that it's corrected. Next steps. Well, in this next month, we are continuing with our staff training. Our staff actually will be ready to go in March. We'll begin promotion and marketing of our facilities. Who will we serve, you might ask? Well, we're reaching out again to those low and middle income residents who are looking for affordable facilities where they can hold their family-oriented gatherings. We're also looking to nonprofit organizations and small businesses that might have a fundraiser or a luncheon at the facility. So we'll begin our promotion and marketing. And then in March, we'll have basically a soft opening, and we'll begin booking a limited number of rentals. We really want to get this. We want to get this right in every way. So we're going to start this off on a small scale, and we're not thinking that we're really going to book more than 1 or 2 events a week. but we're at the first several months, we're going to work very carefully to make sure that we roll it out right. And permanent staff will be on site with the facility monitors to roll out these new procedures. And then by March, we hope to have our new facility rental coordinator on board. Staff are really committed to committed to a successful implementation of these new policies. So we're going to continue to work closely with the neighbors of our centers and to maintain good communication with them and address their concerns as they arise along the way. I'm now finished my presentation. I'm happy to address any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you, Ms. McCaffrey. It was a great presentation. Okay, Ms. Clark, do you have a question? Yep.
Thanks, Judith. I think you've done an exemplary job of addressing the neighborhood concerns. I think your plan is great. My only concern was, since you're reaching out to moderate and low-income families, if there's a low-income family that's scraped together enough for quinceanera, but they don't have enough for the security deposit, is that a deal breaker? Is there any kind of assistance they can get, or?
Commissioner Clark, Chair Wiscombe, good question. I think what we will do is certainly if the security deposit turns out to be too much of a hardship, we'll look at these rules, and perhaps at that case we might look at if it is a hardship, we don't want that to happen for families. So we would look at reducing it so it could be. So it wouldn't prevent people from renting our facility, but so it's still enough of an incentive to follow the rules.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Rincon.
In regards to setting noise limits, how did you establish that at each center? I'm just curious.
Particular noise limits? Well, currently what we do, for example, I'll give you an example, Oak Park. Oak Park main area, we do allow amplified music. It is outdoors. And we do use a decibel meter, which we do look to read no higher than 60 decibels at the sidewalk across from the park. So we'd be using those same measurements for our neighborhood centers. And we found that's been very successful.
Okay. And with respect to DJ versus live music, is there? I just find that kind of, a DJ can get very loud, as you well know. And musicians, I just see that we're eliminating, an incentive to hire a real musician rather than a DJ at these parties, whatever the preference may be. But I just hate to see us eliminate a whole class of individuals that can provide service because of a noise ordinance when that can be addressed with live musicians versus DJs just as well. Just a comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Longstreet?
I'm glad this is coming before us and that these issues have been addressed. I know it's been a long time in the making. One thing between reading through the three different sites, I would just like to see consistency across the board. At Davis, quinceaneras aren't mentioned, but I think it should all read the same. And the same with the bouncy house, because we don't know who's going to come up to the door with it. If it's not allowed, just no bouncy houses at this facility. But it is addressed in Franklin, then not addressed in the other two. And that's those are just things I was looking at as I went through it. I would like to see a provision that if a DJ, because noise is the big one, noise and parking are our two issues, I think, that we can really address in a hard way. If a DJ is not cooperative, I would like to see them banned from our facilities for a certain length of time. There needs to be a penalty with it. Maybe the same goes for a caterer that does not cooperate or whatever. But there should be some sort of, everybody's going to know the rules going in, and if you don't obey them, it's your business to obey them. I'm especially concerned at the West Side Center because of its location. The other two centers have quite a buffer around them for residents. And I think that's why we saw the 6 residents at the West Side, is that's truly an issue. I'd like maybe for you to look at the idea that when you roll it out, the size of the group is determined by the amount of parking we have. I know we can't exactly do that, but maybe we can limit the size of them so the impacts are less. I think starting out, it has to be all right because we're regaining the trust of certain neighbors. So we have to be overly careful in that facility especially. Franklin, 3 sides, there's nobody around, has adequate parking. It has a busy street in front of it. But West Side's unique in that it's right back there. And I think those were my issues. I was glad to see everything spelled out. And that there was mention of other types of parties. I know traditionally that we've had issues with quinceañeras especially, just because of the nature of the party and the age group of the people in attendance. But, it is true. Other groups can come and the same things can happen. That sorority fraternity idea, we have all kinds of things happening. So I like the language for that, and the security guards, I think, are a burden, and I understand the point about these things getting expensive, but it is really expensive to us if there's a problem, to the whole community. And these are public facilities that if something goes wrong, the next day we may not be able to serve seniors lunch, or we may not be able to have summer fun there the next summer because of all the neighborhood complaints. So I'm really cautious, and I'm glad to see all of it spelled out so carefully in these rules. I also think we have the experience with the waterfront, and I'm glad to see we're using that. And you may see as a department that somehow that all comes together in our facilities rental. I mean, I could see a reorganization where it's not necessarily, not that the money goes to one place, but that we have someone in charge of that altogether. And we're not trying to get staff that's main job is to provide services to then be rental agents. I think that's a lot to ask of people. So we have the expertise to change these things, and I'm glad to see we're moving that way.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Yes, Mr. Cavazos.
So first off, as a musician and a member of a band, I would like to echo Mark's sentiment. 60 decibels is 60 decibels, just throwing that out there. But seriously, I wanted to tag on to Ms. Longstreet's comment that, I think it's great that you're open this up. I really like the idea of doing that baby steps approach. I think that West Side Center is the one that kind of concerns me the most, because on all of these, in 2014, we just put the brakes on, and now we're just kind of, here it is again. And those concerns, the reason for the moratorium, those concerns are still valid. And like Ms. Longstreet said, when you look at Franklin, you've got a buffer there. When you get to Davis Center, you've got a buffer. And then you get to the West Side Center, and as nice a facility as it's kind of tucked in there, and the parking is kind of limited. And then on top of that, when you start to factor in the idea of the bike lane on Mitchell Terrena, if that passes, that whole neighborhood is not going to have anywhere to park. So I think in going with your baby steps, if you could maybe factor that in to, hey, let's get to the West Side after we've vetted this and make sure it's all going to work, I think that would be my approach to it.
Great comments. Anyone else? Any comments? I just want to echo Ms. Longstreet's, the commissioner's comments up here. I think you've done a fabulous job with this, and you're addressing some issues that have obviously come up in the past, and also providing future opportunities for beneficial activities for the neighborhoods, and I think that's great, and for our residents. I was a little bit confused on the fees, and I don't want to get into the nitpicking, but I think it's important for everyone to understand exactly what the fees entail, and they might need a little bit more interpretation, and maybe the fine print language does that. But for instance, if you're renting the conference room at the Franklin Center as a nonprofit for 3 hours, and you do your own table and, well, in the conference room you wouldn't do it, but let's say pick another place where you would set up table and chairs and then break them down at the end. So is that part of the cost of the rental? So if you need it for 3 hours for a meeting, do you tack on 45 minutes? Are you really renting it for an hour and a half longer for setup and breakdown? That's what I'm saying. So are you really
Chair
renting
Wiscom
it
and
for-
Commissioners, let me answer the question there.
Yeah.
So the conference room already has the furniture set up, so
Right, so
there's
let's-
no furniture set up there. But essentially, if you're renting the multipurpose room, yes, you'd pay per hour, like our other facilities. So if you're renting for 3 hours, that would be the time that you're having you're setting up the tables. If you had set up, that you're having your event and you're cleaning up would be the time span that you're choosing. And so if you're renting for 3 hours, you would pay 3 hours for a facility monitor. It was outside of office hours. You would pay a fee to have the tables and chairs set up in the diagram in the manner in which you'd like them. And if you had food, in that case, you would have a cleaning fee.
I think the question, though, I think what I'm hearing is you're asking about setting it up.
I'm-
And when you walk in, because I've rented them.
Well, so have I.
Yeah, they're set up.
No, they're not. I'm talking about, for instance, Master Gardeners at Louise Lowry Davis Center. We always set up and break down. So, and, we put everything out and we put everything back. So what I'm asking is, if we arrive 45 minutes early, there has to be a facility monitor there to unlock the door. So the clock starts ticking then. Is that correct? And if we're setting up our own things, are we still paying the $75 if we're setting up and breaking down ourselves? Because that's where I think you really need to be clear. And the only reason I bring this up is because this happens a lot. I've had a lot of people come up to me, not so much at these centers, but at facilities or, waterfront activities where they feel that the rules haven't been really, really clearly stated. So that's why I'm bringing it up. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes, Chair Commissioner, Chair Wiscom, I am. Actually, yes, at the neighborhood centers, we have different uses. We've allowed people to set up their own furniture. Not everybody wants to do that. They
Right.
They want to pay and have someone do that for them.
Then you waive the fee to set it up if they set it up
Right.
themselves and break it
Right.
down themselves. Okay. And is the cleaning fee only for if you have food?
Sometimes when we have things during the day, when there isn't food and lots of extra trash, we don't really have to bring in a extra cleaning service to do cleaning. So,
Okay.
but anything on the weekends or in the evenings when we have other programs and services continuing the next day, we do have a service that comes in to clean up after the event.
Okay, that's great. I was curious on at the West Side Neighborhood Center, the multi-purpose room. So 0 to 2 hours is $13.50 an hour, and then 3+ hours is $31 an hour. Why does it get more expensive when it's 3 hours? Usually I think of volume discount. I was just curious.
Well, at our neighborhood centers, and historically, we've allowed some free use for small groups for a minimal,
okay.
a few, 2 or 3 hours. Yes.
That's okay. That makes.
Yeah, we've tried to encourage more community use during the week.
Okay, that makes
with lower
perfect
fees.
sense. Yeah. Okay. Great. I think you've done a great job, and I think the comments by my fellow commissioners are. I like. Was it you, Ms. Longstreet, that talked? No, maybe it was Mr. Cavaz about doing maybe the West Side Center where there's more concerns and there's more of a neighborhood, maybe taking smaller steps on that one. And I think this is really great, and I think you'll have a lot of success with it. So thank you very much. Okay, I think with no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.